Goeiemorgen, goeiemiddag, goeienaand. Whether it is morning, afternoon, or evening where you are, it's always a good time to watch some plants YouTube. My name is Shanae, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you what my watering schedule looks like. This is the last video in this Pond 101 series, and just so that you know, my watering schedule runs over a 8-week period or pretty much 2-month period. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you what I do within those 8 weeks in terms of watering. So if that sounds good to you, let's get going. So when I started off in my semi-hydro journey, I always used a self-watering plant. Some of them are round like this one, but I also like the ones that has more of a hanging basket type of shape to it. So when I started, I used the advice of keeping a reservoir. So this is what I did when I started off. So I put my, oh, it's dripping all over me. It's dripping all over me. When I started off, I put my substrate, in this case it's leca, in the cash pot, and I would fill up this reservoir. So this kind of just fits into the pot like that, and it just sits on top. So I do keep a reservoir at the bottom of this pot. And I fill up this pot until it probably reach about a centimeter and a half of this pot. A couple of months ago, I then decided to try the wick system. So these pots does come with a wick, so I decided to use it. So this plant I just brought over to show you. This is what the wick looks like, and in pretty much all of the other videos that I've shown you previously, you would probably have seen how I repot a plant using the wick method as well. So this is something that I've done recently, but there's still a lot of plants that is in this type of setup. So probably about 60% of my plants is in this type of setup where it doesn't have a wick, and then the other 40% of the semi-hydro plants is in a wick system. So these plants watering has a very stark difference. So this one I probably water about once a week, and then this one I only water every 3 to 4 weeks, so pretty much once a month. Wow. So let me show you how I water both of these. In the first week of the 8-week cycle, I normally do a flush. As you would have seen in last week's video, there is a lot of nutrients that I add to my nutrient solution. And over time, what it does is it does a nutrient buildup on the substrate. And that normally looks like a white powdery type of substance. So let me quickly grab a plant and then I'll show you exactly what that looks like. This is my Anthurium silver blush, and I'm going to talk about the plant in a second, but I just want to quickly show you a picture of what the top of the substrate looks like. I won't be able to show it to you on camera right now because everything is probably going to be falling out if I try to do that. So I'm going to put up a picture here, and you can see on the top of the leca there is a white powdery substance on it, and that is the nutrients that is building up on the substrate. That is nutrients that the plant won't be able to take up. So that is essentially an excess of nutrients that I fed my plants. And if that does continue, I do run the risk of my plants having a nutrient lockout situation. So essentially what that means is my plant won't be able to take up any nutrients that I do give them later on. So that is not something that I would want, because that is going to impact the overall health of my plant. So to fix that, I'm going to be doing a flush. So both the non-wick and the wick system gets a flush in the beginning of the 8-week watering cycle. Let me show you what a flush looks like. Welcome to my kitchen sink. First thing I do is to remove the nutrient solution or the reservoir that is in the pot. Then I flush. A flush simply just means flooding the substrate with water. Due to the excess of water, the substrate is washed and the excess nutrients are removed, and it goes straight down the drain. So as you can see here, I simply just open the faucet on the max and let the water run all the way through the substrate and down the holes of the pot at the bottom. This will not lead to root rot, as root rot does not occur due to too much water at a time, but because of watering too often. After the flush, I still saw some leckables that had the nutrient build-up. I tried to rinse those, but it was a bit tough to remove. I took those out of the pot and put it in the semi-hydro tub that needs to be cleaned for reuse. More on that process later in the video. So that is essentially what I do when I flush my plants. So like you saw during the flushing, I did remove the reservoir from this pot, but there is just a little bit of water that drained into the pot that was from the flush. But these semi-hydro or these lecker bowls actually retains quite a lot of the water that was used during the flush. So what I'm going to do for the next week is not keep a reservoir, and I'm not going to add nutrients. So for the next week, the plant is pretty much going to take a break from getting any type of nutrients. So I can do a no reservoir on this plant because there is no roots on the outside of this pot. Then I have this plant which you will have seen already on this channel. This is the Anthurium Crystal Mag, and I just want to show you, if I lift up this pot, there is quite a lot of roots in here. These roots are used to water, so if I'm not going to have water in this reservoir for a week, those roots are probably going to have dry rot. So I won't be able to not keep a reservoir on this plant, but I am still not going to give it nutrients. I'm just going to have normal tap water in here without any nutrients. In week 2, you're probably going to find that your plant needs water. So with semi-hydro, it's quite easy again to tell when the substrate is dry. The substrate changes color. So leca is quite easy. It would go from a dark brown kind of color to a more lighter brown color. And then you know your leca is dry and your plant probably have depleted all of the water that's in the leca. Similarly, your pondia would also be able to see when it's dry. Especially those darker color rocks, you would be able to see that it becomes a little bit lighter. So that is a good indication that your plant probably needs water. What I also do, if I am unsure and I use pond that didn't have a lot of darker colors where I can easily see the color change, I would use my finger to just put at the top of the soil, and then I would kind of feel if there is any water left in the substrate. So like I mentioned in that first video, I do get to know my plants quite well. So about 4 to 5 days would be a good time for me to water them again. So saying that the plants have not had nutrients for a week, I'm not going to go up to full strength with this watering. I'm probably going to be doing about the 75%, 80% strength of the nutrients for the first week. From the next watering, I would then add full strength. So here I brought over the nutrient solution. This is a full strength. This is probably about 4 liters. So I'm going to be adding about 1 liter of just plain water to this to dilute it to about 80% strength. Alright, so that is our 80% strength nutrient solution that we are going to use. So with this plant that I did not keep a water reservoir on, it will be quite easy. Saying that the stops. Oh! So with this plant that does not have a reservoir, it should be quite easy to water it. Seeing that the substrate is dry as well, I'm going to do a top watering of it. So what I'm going to do, I am going to fill up this reservoir until I can see the water is about a centimeter and a half from the bottom of this plant. So I do want the leca to sit in a little bit of water. So I'm just going to scoop the cash pot a little bit to the side so I can peek through here where that level is so that I add enough water. Alright, so that is pretty much it. So similarly with the plants that had the roots, I am going to remove the water that it had. That was just plain water. I'm going to throw it out. And then I'm going to top it off with the 80% nutrient solution. So I'm going to put this back in here. This plant is also dry on top, so I might as well give it a top water as well. The crackling of the semi-hydro when it goes from dry to wet, it is so satisfying to listen to be quite honest. Alright, so then our plant is watered for a week. So from week 2 to week 8 is going to be pretty much the same process. I am then going to determine when my reservoir is depleted, and then I'll water again. So here is where the consistency comes in. So like I said in my first video of this plant series, I do assess my plants when they initially come in my plant loving house. So what I found with this self-watering pot and this non-wick system, for the water to be pretty much completely depleted, this 1.5 centimeter water reservoir that we have, for that to be completely depleted and the water level to be below this cash pot, it probably takes about 9 days or so. So every 9 days I would then check the pot. So I pretty much would lift the pot up and move it to the side, peek through to see if it is below that level. If it is, then I would water it again. From week 2 onwards, I would then use a full strength watering. So I would kind of just move the pot to the side, similar to what I explained to you before, and I won't throw the water over the top of the substrate because most often the substrate is quite wet still because of that wicking action that the liquor did. So I'm just going to throw it towards the side of the plant, and I'm going to throw it so that it reaches that 1.5 centimeter that I've had before. So consistency is key with my plants. So I normally use that first couple of weeks when I get a new plant into this plant loving house. I assess what the plant needs, but I also then adapt my plant to my conditions. So like I say, consistency is key, especially with watering. So what I would do, I'm the kind of person that do not let the substrate dry out completely. So I pretty much monitor my plants to make sure that I water again when the level of water is just below the cash pot. And that is what I do consistently. Sometimes it's not within 9 days, sometimes it is 11 days, sometimes it is 12 days, sometimes it is 7 days, depending on other factors like the weather. If it is more hot, the water is going to be depleted quicker. If it is a little bit cooler, the water is going to take a little bit longer to absorb. The plant is going to need a little bit less water during that period. So if you are a person that likes your substrate to dry out completely, keep that up. Where you would see a root rot, whether it is wet rot or dry rot, is when you have those inconsistencies. So if you water your plant when it is completely dry consistently, and then all of a sudden you then start watering your plant the next week when there is still water in the reservoir and the substrate hasn't completely dried out, or 2 weeks later you then water your plant and your plant has been dry for a week. So that is going to cause some issues. So just be consistent, not the days that you water, but the level of drying out the substrate. So we've pretty much gone through the entire 8-week cycle with this one. So after the 8 weeks, we go back to week 1, which is typically a first week of a month. So then we would flush again and the process would start all over again. So that is my non-wick plants. Let me show you what the watering looks like for the wick plants. Alright, so now we are going to be talking about the plants that have a wick system. And this is my beautiful Anthurium Carla Blackier, and this is a plant that I probably got about 3 months ago. This is the first leaf in my care, so really beautiful, and then it does have an older leaf. So I really like this color. This one has a little bit of a thin veins. I do have another one that has a little bit of a thicker vein, but I really like the dark color and the thin veins on this one. So really excited to see how this one grows out. But let me tell you how I water these plants that is in wick. So the first week for pretty much all of the plants in the house that is in semi-hydro looks exactly the same. So it's going to go through a flush, so similar to what I showed you before. So week 2 to 8 is where the watering schedule differ for wick plants compared to the non-wick plants that we just looked at. So in week 2, we are going to add some water to the reservoir. So here is currently no water in here, and I'm literally just going to add some water, and I'm going to add the water to the level of where the wick system is pretty much halfway in the water. So I'm going to put it just in there to see where it is currently. It looks like it needs a little bit more water. So seeing that this substrate also had dried out for the last week, I can also just do a top watering so that the substrate does also get wet almost immediately. So then of course goes down into the reservoir, and I think we have just hit that sweet spot where the wick is pretty much halfway submerged into the water. So that is pretty much it that we do within the second week of watering this wick system. So week 3 to 5 for this plant is pretty much all about monitoring. What I also monitor is whether the substrate is dry. I did have some plants in the past where it is in a wick system, but the top of the substrate still dries out. And I think what that means is the wick is not in the right spot to water the entire substrate. So I think the wick is a little bit too low. When I do repot that plant next, I am probably going to do the wick a little bit higher up so that the top of the substrate also get watered when the wick wicks up the water. So in week 5, I pretty much take out the reservoir, I remove the water, and then I just replenish it with more nutrient water. And again, I put it to the level of where the wick is pretty much halfway into the water. And that is pretty much it. For the next 3 weeks or so until it needs a flush, I again just monitor, see where the substrate is dry, then I would water it, but highly unlikely, pretty easy when you use a wick system. And this is the process that I am going to use for my plants in the future. So with this process, it makes the watering so much easier. So in summary, I pretty much have all of my plants in self-watering pots. They either have a wick or they don't have a wick. So the ones without a wick pretty much have a little bit more of an involved watering schedule compared to the ones that is in self-watering pot that has a wick. So all of my plants get a flush in week 1. In week 2, they all get a reservoir. For the one that does not have a wick, I make sure that the water level is about 1 to 1.5 centimeter above the bottom of the cash pot. So the one in a wick, I make sure that the wick is halfway into the water during week 3 and 5. So the ones that do not have a wick, I make sure that the water level does go down until the end of the cash pot, and then I would replenish it back to about 1.5 centimeters above the bottom of the cash pot. So the one in a wick, I just monitor during week 3 to 5 to just make sure that the substrate doesn't for some other reason dry out. 5, I would then change the nutrient solution that is in the reservoir. Up until week 8, I would then also just monitor the plant that the substrate doesn't dry out for some other reason. And then we start the process all over again in week 1, where we flush out all of those nutrients and prevent nutrient lockout. So those are only for the plants that is in semi-hydro. I actually do have plants that is still in a soil substrate. It is a soilless substrate, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to say that it is a soil substrate. So even those ones need to be watered on a consistent basis. And like I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be on a certain day a week. Sometimes it's a couple of days out, so every 6 days or every 7 days or every 8 days. So it doesn't always fall on the exact same day every single week. So that is a lot of things to consider and a lot of things to remember. Over the last couple of weeks, I must admit, I have had a couple of headaches that I struggled to completely deal with. And I've realized that I am trying to, not only with my plant hobby, but with a lot of my other hobbies and, personal life, career-wise, etc. There's a lot of things that I just store in my brain, and I have this expectation of myself to remember all of these all the time. And I think that is kind of getting a little bit too much. So what I've done is I've created a monthly planner, and this one is specifically for my plant hobby. And I must admit, this has helped me so much. It has taken a huge load off of my shoulders. Whenever I write things down, it really feels that a load has been lifted from my shoulders. Like I don't have that expectation that I need to remember the last time that I watered a plant or the last time that I flushed a plant. I can just check my calendar to see when that happened and know exactly when again I need to do the next flush or the next watering, etc. So I just created a simple monthly planner. On the bottom, I've just created monthly goals. I've only added 4, there's only 4 weeks in a month, so I didn't want to do too much. So pretty much a goal a week. And then over here, I have a to-do list, so kind of things that I practically need to do to achieve those goals. And then on this side, I just have a block for each single day in the month, and I kind of just use it to jot down when I did what, so that I know when exactly I need to do the next step. Like for instance, on Saturday the 4th of October, I did a flush. So I know 4 or 5 days later, around the 8th or the 9th, I need to then start looking at whether my plants need some water again, whether they are dry and they need some water. Then I would do that, and then I know probably about 9 days from there, check again if the plants that does not have a wick, whether their reservoir is still okay or whether I need to start topping off that water. So in week 5, which is probably in November, I make sure that I change the nutrient solution for the plants that is in a wick, and in the first week of December I can then just check that I do the next flush and the new cycle starts. So like I said, this really helps me for just keeping track of where I am. And it does take away that expectation that you have to not forget to water your plants a certain time or repot the plant, etc, etc. So I really like these. I'm probably going to continue with this in 2026. So I'm going to create a 12-month calendar, which is from January 2026 to December 2026. And I am also going to put it available to you guys. I'm going to put it on my website, which is www.plantlovinghouse.co.za. So if you think that something like this would also be helpful for you, I'm going to be sharing probably mid-November. So around the 15th of November, it should go onto my website so you can have a look at that. But really helpful tool to me. So now you've seen 2 different methods that have 2 completely different watering schedules. So both of them have its advantages and its disadvantages. So I would say the plant enthusiast that would enjoy the non-wick type of setup is probably people that really loves to do something in the plant hobby. So when I started, that would be me. I wanted to water my plants all the time, and that was my way of staying active with my plants. So the wick system is probably for the plant enthusiast that has a little bit more of a hectic lifestyle. So if you have a career that requires you to work a lot of overtime or travel a lot, or you just travel for fun, then that is probably something that you would find a lot of value in, because the plant can pretty much live without you being super involved in the process. I must say the first month or so of having my plants in that kind of setup has been very strange, not watering them all the time. So it does get some getting used to not overlove your plants. The worst thing that you can do with a plant that has a wick is to overwater it. Like me, probably about 2 weeks into a wick system, I was starting to wonder when I can water the plant, and I was getting a little bit anxious. So I kept on sticking to my process to determine whether my plant actually needs water. So that is to look at the color of the substrate. If it is a little bit lighter, then I know that the substrate is dry. And just to make sure, I would also do the finger test where I put my finger on the substrate and just feel whether there is some water on it or not. If there was, I would resist the urge to water it again. And that has been quite transformative in my life, I must admit. I do have a little bit more time to do other things. You choose what is right for you. So there is no right or wrong way to do things in this hobby. It's all about what fits your lifestyle and what works for you. And most times you'll find that out through trial and error, just like I did. So I hope that you found these things that I've shared today a little bit helpful for you to also start thinking about what kind of lifestyle you want to lead and maybe what kind of watering schedule would work for your lifestyle. So with this video, we are also at the end of the Pond 101 series. So I hope I managed to cover everything. I answered pretty much all of your questions. If you still have any questions, put it in the comments and we can have a conversation around that. So in next Sunday's video, I will show you 5 plants that is still in the non-wick system and then 5 plants that is in the wick system. The wick system, it's only been about 3 or 4 months now, so I think most of them only have grown 1 leaf, but some of them are definitely good ones to have a look at. So I can't wait to show you that. But there is a couple of other videos that you can check out in the meantime. So on Wednesday, there should be a video as well as on Friday. Until next Sunday, have a lekker rest of your day. Bye bye.